Hello, everybody, and happy post-Monday trade to you. Well, it is an interesting day, and the reason I called today's post what I did isn't because today was disappointing. It actually was a profitable day for me, and partly undid the dreadful damage from Friday. But from disappointing, I mean from the bullish perspective, because there are a number of things going on which our darling bull friends were counting on that just didn't transpire. Let's walk through them. The first one I'll point out is Apple. And Apple, of course, today kicked off their Worldwide Developer Conference, and the big, worst secret ever kept was the introduction of their augmented reality device. I just saw it referred to as the Oculus, APP, like Oculus, haha. But it's essentially their VR goggles. And I watched, and I'm an old Apple guy, I go back for decades with Apple. And normally, back in the day, there would be like a huge auditorium filled with rather odoriferous developers watching and sharing and getting excited, all very live, kind of like you were there. I don't know if they've done this in the past because I don't watch these things yearly, but this was basically a 2-hour commercial, very choreographed and tightly edited, and a bunch of Apple employees that were just a little too precious, talking about the various things. And they worked through all the boring stuff. They talked about, the OS and the watch and the iPad and the new computers and all this. But the big event, and they're trying to basically channel Steve Jobs from the grave, is the just one more thing. And it was, of course, the Apple Vision Pro. And they're trying to introduce a new sector of computing. I think they call spatial computing. I don't know if that has quite a ring to it or not, or if it'll take or not. But I was watching the prices throughout the introduction of the product, and this is today's activity. It was really interesting because the event launched, and this is a classic buy the rumor, sell the news. The event started around about here, and it was a few minutes late, but then it kicked off, and that was like the final bout of, isn't this going to be great? And then the downtrend began, because essentially all through this, it was just sort of like dull, boring stuff, and who cares? And then things got exciting because the goggles, came out, and the initial response to those was really positive because they are very cool. I mean, I think they're terrific. But then this initial drop here was like kind of the dull part of it, where it was just essentially showing that the tumble here was because it's basically like, oh, I'm looking at flat screens, big BFD. Then I had another lift here because they started to show off some of the kind of unique things you could do with it. And I say again, I'm going to buy one of these things. I think they're really cool looking, and it could be a very important new product. But the plunge here was when they announced, and it'll be available sometime next year, and it's going to cost $3,500. So the zeal surrounding a super expensive product that will be available in our lifetimes maybe kind of took the wind out of their sails. And what's kind of gross about this market right now is that tick for tick, ES did the exact same thing. So let's just think about that for a second. The entire, $20-25 trillion stock market is anchored to a pair of goddamn goggles. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. I'll say it again. The entire, global financial system is anchored to the feature set of some goggles that nobody really needs. So there you have it. That is the world that you have created. So congratulations. But that's how the day went. So that was one form of disappointment. Another one was from our bone saw loving friends in Saudi Arabia. And what happened there was this right here, this pop. So like, oil was strong. We went into the weekend, and the very nice people from Saudi Arabia came out and said, hello, customers, since we have one and only one thing that, if it weren't for oil, they'd basically be in the business of selling sand to people, I suppose, is the only thing they have worthwhile, but it happens to be a very valuable thing. And they said, well, that thing we're not going to sell nearly as much of. So screw you guys, the price is going up. And it worked. The price went exploding higher, and then spent the rest of the day withering away, so that in the end, it was actually did nothing but, it did nothing at all. It did nothing at all. The price went up 7 cents. So you know what you can do with your bone saw. Early in the day, I bought puts on XOP. That worked out. And I've held on to my other energy shorts. So that was the other disappointment for those darling bullish friends. These ones in the desert. So interesting stuff. Now, as far as the market in general goes, the ES is still well above the Fibonacci retracement. We of course had our disgusting move on Thursday and even worse Friday, and we just eased back a little bit on that. But you know, there's certainly nothing particularly bearish at all about this chart. On the contrary, it's still quite at risk, I would say, for move higher. And I would say the key element at this point, because we don't really have any other, is the mid-August peak, like so, boink, like that. And so that's the next challenge for our darling bullish friends, to see if they can push it past that level or not. It's not a particularly important level, but it's all I've got to offer you, because it's the only meaningful price point, with the exception of the lifetime highs way the hell up here at 4,800, which we're actually not that far below. As far as the NQ goes, that is also above its Fibonacci. And, you know, this is very AI dependent, is very Apple dependent. Yeah, but I say again, this is a tough read, because this is just a big fat mess at this point. I mean, the market was way cleaner when we were dealing with this. It was just a steady series of lower lows and lower highs. At this point, we have had this incredible move, largely driven by AI fantasy. But we still have all this overhead supply that should suppress easy price growth. And the last one is RTY. And this whole pattern here is what I find kind of interesting, because as we look at the like the 4 hours on this, you can see we've been banging around here in this enormous range, and most recently this range here, so on the low side down here, and on the upper side I've basically anchored this to Friday's peak. And you can see we gave up a goodly portion of that today, but we're still very, very range bound. Actually, I lied. Let's just do one last one, the VIX. In a perverse way, this is actually great news for the bears, because the VIX is goddamn $14. I mean, it's absolutely laughable. It's assuming there'll never be a problem in human history again, in our, ever. This thing is scraping around near just preposterously base levels. Unless we go to like 5 on the VIX, I think we may be finding some important lows around here, because these are the same levels that we were experiencing back in June of 2021. And it seems hard to believe, but there was a time not that long ago that this thing was approaching 40. But we have been, with some regularity here, been engaged in this down, up, down, up, down, up, down phenomena. And bring on nuclear war. At this point, I will happily take it. As long as you don't attack Palo Alto, I'm fine with that. But we got to get this thing up again. Now let's get this up into the upper 20s at least. And with that twinkle in my eye, I shall bid you farewell. And I've got another post waiting later on, because that's what I do. I make content. Adios.